Hello and welcome to the Markel Meets podcast, brought to you by Markel, the people-powered global specialist insurer. In this series, we'll be getting to know colleagues from Markel's wholesale business through a series of simple one-to-one chats, where our guests reveal a bit about what's happening in their respective roles and markets, and share their opinions on topics such as attracting new talent, the future of the London market, and responding to emerging risks. We hope that Markel Meets will offer our listeners interesting insight, fresh perspectives, and an honest introduction to our most valued asset, which is our people. Our guest today is Kyle McGrath, Head of Fine Art and Specie for North America at Markel. Kyle joined Markel very recently from Private Client Select, formerly AIG Private Client Group, where she had spent just under 3 years as head of their fine art and collections team. After graduating from Vanderbilt University in Tennessee with a BA focused on art history, French and corporate strategy, Kyle joined the insurance industry in 2012 as an aviation broker for JLT based in London, before moving to New York to join Hiscox as a professional liability underwriter in 2013. She then moved to XL Catlin, where she held 2 strategy roles before she took on her first fine art and specie underwriting position. Kyle then spent 2 years at AXA XL, including a year as global underwriting lead, leaving in 2021 to join Private Client Select. In her role at Markel, Kyle is responsible for leading Markel's fine art business in North America and driving the strategic, profitable expansion of the class of business. As part of this, she will be tasked with developing the regional underwriting strategy, product offering, and regional footprint, working closely with Markel's fine art underwriting team in the US. Kyle, welcome. It's absolutely wonderful to have you here on Markel Meets today. Thank you so much for joining me. I think that it's now, you're in the first few months of your tenure with Markel now, but what would be wonderful is to kick off, if you could share with me why Markel, what were your reasons for joining Markel? And now that you have joined, what your first impressions have been?
Thank you for having me. It's so exciting to be here today and talk a little bit about my journey to Markel and what we have in mind for the business. I joined Markel predominantly because of its existing position in the market as a fantastic leader in this space, and really the opportunity to take an existing team that has done such a fantastic job of building out this reputation and really taking it to the next level. And when I was in the interview process, I was just consistently blown away by the caliber of talent here. And each and every individual I met with just made me that much more excited to join the team.
And as you mentioned, Caroline, I know that you have come in with ambitions and targets to really grow the North American book, but you are joining a very well-regarded and well-established team.
Yes. The team has done a wonderful job of building out from square one, started by a colleague of mine who sits in the LA area, really by building out broker relationships in that local area and growing it from there.
So I'm intrigued to know, because this is a relatively new world for me, what does a day in the life of a fine arts underwriter look like?
So the best part of this business, I think, is that in some ways no 2 days are the same. In other days, there's things about the action of underwriting that are quite familiar from one day to the next. So predominantly, I always say this is a people business first. So working very closely with our brokers to address new business submissions, talk through those opportunities, analyze the risk, walk through specific questions we might have. Hopefully on a good day, you get to meet with a broker in person and really broaden that relationship. And then another piece of it is obviously continuing to service our existing clients and making sure that we're there to support them throughout the policy lifecycle, whether that's through a midterm adjustment to account for a new acquisition they might have made or an art fair that they might be attending if they are a gallery or dealer. So it's really that balance between making sure that we are there for the book that we currently have, but then of course are very much actively looking to grow the book.
I'm sure our audience will be very interested to hear, Kyle, and I appreciate I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. You've only been with us for a short time so far, but in terms of your plans for the next 6, 12 months and beyond, how are those shaping up?
So to your point, I think the best part of starting somewhere new is you kind of get a blank slate in terms of how you want to view things. And really what first things first we need to do is round out the existing team that we have. So we're currently looking to hire additional staff to help support our book and, again, allow for the underwriters to continue to write new business and grow and be out in the market and very much representing the Fine Art and Specie team globally, but Markel more broadly. And then beyond that, it's really identifying what areas we might be underrepresented in where we could stand to have a presence. So going forward, I'll be working very closely with the team to think through where do we have a good market share already, and frankly, where could we stand to put a bit more effort and resource behind, both geographically and in terms of business mix and product.
As you just mentioned, Kyle, you are in growth mode. You are looking to expand an already very strong team. What is it exactly that you look for in a colleague and in an underwriter? And do you think that there are certain characteristics that are really integral to making a good underwriter?
Absolutely. In that I think clearly you have to be able to look at any client or risk holistically and then distill it down to its parts in terms of what are the real exposures that we have at play, whether that's down to their business activities, physical location, potential future activity. That being said, I think behaviorally it's very important that we bring on individuals who are flexible, who understand the power of negotiation, who know when to stand firm and when it's really important to stick to your convictions and your position. And then also when, for the sake of relationships in the business, you can kind of see the forest through the trees and perhaps that balance of give and take. That's what I love about this business, is that it really shouldn't be black or white. There's a lot of middle ground in terms of the actual underwriting process to getting to the final part where you're binding the policy.
In addition to some of those more technical abilities and those attributes that you just mentioned, Kyle, how important is it to have a passion for the industry that you're working with?
So I feel very fortunate because I absolutely love the art market. And I always say that insurance is the industry in which I work, and I feel so fortunate to have, quote unquote, fallen into insurance and then found myself in this corner of the industry that supports a market that I feel so strongly about. I think there are two different types of people that really succeed in this space. One type is clearly the type that loves the underlying art, but fundamentally we need people who come at this from a true insurance background and don't necessarily have that. So I think their success can be found in either avenue. But fundamentally, whether or not you're a fine art and specie underwriter or an aviation underwriter, or marine underwriter, you have to constantly keep your finger on the pulse in terms of what's happening in those industries. Because if you have blinders on, then you're not understanding your end client and the macro environmental factors that impact that business.
Oh, absolutely. Building on what you just mentioned, Kyle, about the need for underwriters to really keep their finger on the pulse of what's happening in their respective industries. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening, in the fine art world at the moment that's particularly interesting or pertinent to you and your colleagues?
Absolutely. So to your point, it is very important that from an underwriting perspective, we keep a close eye on the art market and what's happening both in private sales, at auction, and really get a sense of where the values are going, but also holistically how much we are seeing overall in terms of the activity. So while sales have definitely cooled a bit from what we might have seen in the previous few years, buying activity is still stronger than it was at pre-pandemic levels. And as a result, you continue to see our larger collectors acquire new pieces and need additional capacity to support those activities. Again, when we set an insurance policy at inception, there's a certain limit associated with that, but the idea is that we can continue to grow with the client that is within the appetite of our organization and the capacity that we can provide. In addition to that, we continue to see globalization impact the art market from a fair standpoint, and again, where our clients are buying art and the exhibition activity that museums are undertaking. So really, the traveling exhibition space has had a direct impact on the insurance market, and that museums that are borrowing these pieces need to make sure that they have coverage in place to support those loans. So it really is a direct correlation to how we adjust our underwriting.
With the increased globalization of the market, has that also changed, the preferences and the trends in terms of what's being bought, what's going for a higher price in terms of the kind of the type of art, the artists that are the most desired?
I think that it's definitely shed light on certain artists and areas of the market that might have been previously underrepresented or untapped to some degree. And it is always interesting to see when you go to an art fair which artists are represented by dealers, because oftentimes at different fairs or different years, they will showcase different artists. And that's often indicative of the underlying buying habits and also some aspect of what these dealers predict is going to happen in the market. I also think that in addition to globalization, you have seen a real shift and interest in, as I mentioned before, underrepresented groups. So female artists, for example, have been really championed in ways that we hadn't seen in years prior, which certainly is long overdue.
And in terms of specific underwriting trends or means and ways of underwriting, obviously you are based in the US, and you have a North American remit, but you are working in a very global market within a global team. Are there kind of significant distinctions between fine art insurance in the US or the UK, or is it a fairly kind of standard offering?
So I think it's a standard offering with regional nuance in terms of how we deliver the product, how we work with brokers. But at the end of the day, to your point, it is a global market that we support, and therefore our global footprint within Markel is very well positioned to align to our clients' needs. One of the best parts about working in this industry is you always have to keep that mindset at the forefront of your thinking, knowing that if you are supporting a dealer, for example, that they could go to a fair in Hong Kong if they're based in New York, and making sure that that coverage is appropriate. So collaborating with our colleagues across the world is part and parcel with what we do to make sure that we understand what's happening in those geographies, and perhaps if there are new risks that might be present there that we weren't aware of previously. But to your point, it's also very important to have boots on the ground to foster those broker relationships, to be present at the industry events that support the art market. So having that balance is really important.
And it's not just, the people that are traveling, is it, Kyle? Obviously, that there is a quite a complex infrastructure, operational infrastructure that exists behind the scenes in order to keep the art world moving and turning. And I know that insurance and the coverage that Markel offers speaks to many of those different aspects of the industry. But can you just kind of briefly give us a flavor of some of the moving parts that maybe someone who's not well versed in this industry might not be aware of?
Well, I think you just touched on it in the question. It really is the moving parts, right? So one of the biggest risks as art insurers that we face is transit exposure. So when someone buys a new piece, whether that's at auction or from a gallery, shipping that to their home, if a dealer is bringing works to a fair, if a museum is organizing an exhibition, that activity of just taking a painting off a wall and shipping it from one place to the next obviously presents exposure. So one of the exciting parts of the job is getting to understand those vendor partners that work to support our clients as well, making sure that we are very much up to date on their best practices and how they do their work so that we can hopefully recommend different vendors and trusted professionals. But again, understand the actual exposure, because the best part is if you really understand how they go about doing that work, you really can get a comfort level with it and ultimately provide a solution that makes everyone feel comfortable.
And do you see a direct correlation in your markets, Kyle, with what's happening in the wider world from a socio-political perspective?
Absolutely. I mean, inherently, art is meant to elicit an emotion. There is often political, ideological, religious meaning behind artwork and the institutions that support that work. And so as a result, and I'm sure you've seen in the media and headlines, a lot of the time it is the target of that emotional reaction. And so going into an election year in the US and just what's happening more globally at a macro level, there's definitely a risk inherent in terms of the institutions that support artists and those messages that they are trying to convey. That being said, I don't think the market's going to shy away from that anytime soon, and nor should they. That is the remit of artists.
I suppose that's not something that's ever going to change, is it? Regardless, it may come in peaks and troughs, but
it's a means for expression.
The nature of art is that there will always be that element of emotional reaction. I suppose as an underwriter, that's something that, again, going back to your comment on keeping your finger on the pulse and having that just kind of instinctive understanding of some of the trends. That's one of the potential kind of risks that you need to be aware of.
We are here to protect the art market, the institutions that house that art, and to your point, there is physical risk that often comes as a result of what is happening on a global scale, even at an ideological level. So it definitely forces us again to consistently review the coverage, review our underwriting questions and process, and make sure that we are honing in on the right risks and evolving and changing in that manner.
While I appreciate it's very difficult, to give a definitive answer on this, Kyle, what, based on your experience of the market and everything, all the trends that you have witnessed kind of come and go over the years, in terms of specifically insurance I'm asking about now, what do you think that from a people and kind of professional perspective, the next generation of fine art insurance looks like?
I think we need to think a bit outside the box in terms of our recruiting process and who we look to bring into the industry. And fundamentally, it should be people with a creative mindset who are constantly looking to maybe challenge the way we've done things historically and can think about how we evolve and change for the future, frankly, to avoid obsolescence, right? I mean, the insurance industry can at times be known to be slow to adapt, and the art market is the exact opposite of that. It is constantly evolving and taking things into new directions. So I think we need to emulate the market that we support in that vein and make sure that when we bring the next generation of talent into the industry, that we really convey that it is such an interesting space. There are so many physical things and concepts that need to be insured, most of which can be, some of which we haven't found a solution for. So finding those individuals with that mindset is going to be critical to maintaining relevance.
Would you have any particular wisdom that you would pass on to those individuals within the next generation?
Well, I wish I could somehow get on a pedestal and just tell everyone that studies art history that art insurance exists, because I did not know that this was a career path possible for me when I was an art history student. And like many people, I fell into insurance. So I think when you think about studying fine art or art history, you might not come into insurance as your first potential career path, but ultimately it's been such an interesting and rewarding career because fundamentally what we are doing is ensuring that art is in existence for decades to come, and that we can provide a solution to protect and help our clients in the time of need if something does go wrong.
And we're almost at the end of our chat today, Kyle. It's genuinely been so interesting to hear from you, to understand a little bit about what you have planned. We're delighted to have you at Markel. I'm going to give you a chance now, as I do with all of our guests on Markel Meets, to pitch to me in true elevator pitch style, the answer to why Markel. We're going, and I don't know how many floors, in fact, there are in the New York office, but at 20 Fenchurch Street, you would start on the 27th floor, and you have the time it takes to get from 27 to the pavement. What are you telling that broker, that prospective insured, about Markel to convince them that we are the right risk partner for them?
Well, frankly, it's down to the people and a promise. We have fantastic people on the front end working on bringing the business in, making sure that we understand you, and we'll work with you throughout the policy term. But then at the end of the day, we're here to sell a claims product and a solution when things do go off the rails, possibly. And I can fundamentally say that our claims team will deliver that.
People and a promise. I think that's a perfect summation. Thank you so much, Kyle. It's been an absolute pleasure. I wish you the very, very best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening.